So to answer this question, let's start from the top. I believe that most people view the world in two different ways. You either view the world through idealism or realism. When you are a kid, you are taught certain morals of how to live in the world, and a lot of people go through life continuing to see the world in that way. Some of these ideals we still retain throughout our lives. For example, don't kill people. But as you get older, you realize that the world is a bit more murky than people believe, and in fact, there are other forces in the world that prevent people from acting exactly towards those ideals. One of those things are economic forces. People need to survive, and that is why realism is the second type of viewing the world. This doesn't mean that people give up on ideals. I believe that everyone every day wakes up with ideals in mind, and that is what drives us. The world is driven by the difference between the way that the world is and the way that people want to see the world. For example, every day people might go to work because they envision themselves having a bigger house or having enough money to have another child. Personally, I believe over the past few years I have moved away from idealism more to a realism point of view, and that is why in the last video I wasn't talking in moral terms. I was just kind of talking about my own realization that the world is not as perfect as I was led to believe when I was a kid. However, I wouldn't say that I am a realist. The one reason that I really like Taoism is that I do believe it is okay with the way the world is, but it also acknowledges that the world is perfect in its imperfection. There is some law to the way that the world works between humans and nature, and if people break those laws, there is usually a result, be it good or bad. But becoming more of a realist, becoming more of a Taoist isn't a bad thing. I actually think realizing the way that the world actually works can be very powerful and can give you autonomy. And that is at the crux of my argument here as I go through the other key points. So the first key point to back up my argument for why I believe I should leave is the idea of change. A lot of my thinking in the belief that humans are driven by how they want the world to be comes from the ideas of Hegel, who believed that human society has values, and at different points in history we put some values above others, and sometimes when we do this, one value will become less important as we strive to get something else. And as we move from the way that the world is to the way that we want to see, there is change. One of these changes gets to my second point, which is human relationships, as I touched on in the last video. As someone who enjoys history, I believe that looking at the world in its holistic view throughout history, we can understand not only human society, but we can also understand what I as an individual want in my life. And human relationships over the past thousands of years have changed dramatically. As I said in the last video, a long time ago, we lived in tribes. And back then, I believe that loyalty was a lot more important of a value than it is today. In my last video, obviously, if I still talk to you, I believe that we are still friends and loyalty is between us. But in the modern world, there are a lot more relationships between humans that are more fickle than they may have been a long time ago. Even compared to 500 years ago, when people remained on the land of their fathers a lot more, even 50 years ago, when people didn't need to travel as far away to survive, to make a living. From a Taoist perspective, though, none of this change is either good or bad. It's just both have their good and bad. For example, in the past, even though loyalty was a stronger value and people remained with their family and friends for longer periods of time on the same piece of land for most of their lives, the community was favored more than the individual. Compare that to today, where people are free to move away from their land and their family and their friends to make new connections. So they have the individualism and freedom to do that. But the downside is that it is more on the individual to create long-lasting relationships. And also the world, it has become harder to retain those relationships because of the economic forces around us. So what does this have to do with my decision to go elsewhere? That gets to my third point, which is survival. In the past, people's survival was more tied to the people around them. If you worked on a farm or something, you needed to work with your friends and family to get that done. In the modern day, it is not to that same extent as it once was. Sure, there are people who offer their children a position in their company, but for most people, individualism, because that is more important, individualism, it is on the individual more now to find destiny in their own life. And we as individuals must realize that we cannot rely on anybody but ourselves to find destiny. And so, given this situation, it stands to reason that remaining in one place is only up to you as an individual to choose, unless there are other people who are willing to give you a helping hand. But it is not up to anybody but yourself in the end. Which gets to the fourth point, which is meaning. One change that happened within these human relationships is that in the past, when most of your life was on the same piece of land with the same people, your only knowledge of the world was in that small vicinity. But over the course of the past 100 of years, even in the course of my own lifetime, our access to knowledge has changed so dramatically with media, with social media, with the internet, that we have knowledge of how so many other people live in the world, that the choices of how to live your life and to give it meaning have become innumerable. There is an up and downside to that, however. In the past, when you just lived on the land, it was very clear what the meaning of your life should be. Work with your family and friends to survive by planting food or going on a hunt. However, today, because of the access to information and being able to see what other people are doing, the good thing is that you have the freedom to do whatever you want, but the bad thing is that you're always comparing yourself to others, which, even if that is a bad thing, you realize the ups and downs of your own life by doing that. And you realize that you do not have as much power in your own being as you thought possible. But what is the core way that people compare themselves today? The fifth thing that I'm going to talk about is money. As a kid, I was taught that money was evil, especially because I came from a Christian background. But as you get older, you come to the realization that even though too much money and becoming too obsessed with money can destroy you, not having any money at all can also destroy you too. So money is important. And that is a difference between how we live today and the past. Even though there were coins in the Middle Ages, a lot of people just traded what they owned for what another person owned in order to survive. And so in the modern society, to have meaning, money is the vehicle to get that meaning and to build relationships. If relationships have become more fickle in the modern world and are based off what you can give other people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, that is how they work, then it stands to reason that in this world, you need to try to make money in order to survive and in order to become the person that you want to be. Which, let's give a more concrete answer. I do not believe that remaining in the United States, given my own abilities within this particular situation, that I can achieve that goal to the best of my abilities. But it goes further than that. As a human being, one of the changes that humans, I believe, have experienced over the past 100 of years is that because money has become more important in our daily lives, we are different than our ancestors in that survival and meaning in life have become separated because also of the media and the access to information that we have now. In the past, when you just worked on the same land with the same people all the time and your world was just that, your meaning was to work with those people based off loyalty to survive, and that was all true work. But today, there are lots of people who are doing things that they do not enjoy, but they need to do in order to survive. Hence, they are working to survive, but not exactly working for something meaningful. And as an individual with my own experiences coming back to America, I don't believe that the experiences and the knowledge that I've made throughout my life can continue to be used by remaining here. I would have to change myself and create new meaning. And I find that very hard to do because I have emotional attachment to that meaning. And to go to work in a job, to learn a new skill, just to survive, might be a very disheartening experience. But it doesn't have to just exist. I don't have to just exist here. The sixth point is equality. Growing up in the United States, I was taught that equality existed for many reasons. Number one, because it is underneath the American Constitution and laws. People are equal underneath the law. I was also taught in Christianity that everyone is equal under God. However, once you accept that things change, and specifically money is a core aspect of modern society, you realize that people are not as equal as you were led to believe when you were younger. Also because the world is not as idealistic as that. People are born sometimes more healthier. People are born more attractive. People are just born with more money. And so given this situation, don't become obsessed with it, but I believe that it should be one's goal in life to try to live up to this value of equality. How do I go from where I am to a more equal position in my life compared to other people? And I do not believe that remaining here, given my own skills and abilities, that is as possible as it would be elsewhere. But that gets to the seventh point, which is respect. If human relationships have become more fickle now, and if money is one of the ways that people are valued in those human relationships, and if there are people who are out there making more money and becoming more respected from doing less work, like dancing on TikTok or doing OnlyFans or saying Hawk Tua, or sitting on their asses using their parents' money to just kind of throw money around into investment funds to get more money, you begin to question, what was I taught as a kid going to school, learning all of this stuff only to make less money and be less respected in the world? There is an imbalance. Some skills are less respected than others, even if they are less valuable to solving problems in the world. That is an absurdism in the world that you need, an absurdism in this world that you need to kind of come to terms with, unfortunately. And why would you want to live a life realizing that your struggles don't need to exist because there are other people out there who do not have these struggles by living a simpler life, even doing stupid things? And so if human relationships are fickle, what is the necessary need to remain in one place, such as America? Especially with the modern technology, I can remain friends and stay connected to the people who I truly value and who truly value me. Which gets to the eighth point, which is nationalism versus humanity, which, if we believe that human relationships change over time, and they've changed from tribes to villages to towns to kingdoms to countries, then it stands to reason that human relationships are changing on a daily basis, even right now, even if we're not aware of it. Over the past 100 years since World War II, nationalism has eroded, and even over the past 20 to 30 years, as globalization has ramped up and companies have gone to other countries to set up shop, nationalism has been eroded. So we must ask, why are companies allowed to do that to improve themselves, but us individuals are not allowed to? And this gets to the idea of money, in that once you realize that it doesn't really matter where you live as long as you can make more money in another place. And it gets to respect. Once you realize that There are people in some places making more money doing the same thing, and the only real difference is that they were living elsewhere. You realize that you can do that too. And you also, once you acknowledge that equality does not exist, that there are people in this world who are working harder jobs, for example, working 7 days a week at a factory, or working a couple hours a day to make billions of dollars, or be like Elon Musk, who spends half of his day just kind of on Twitter posting around while he's the richest person in the world and he inherited a lot of money from his kids. You realize I need to take autonomy in my own life and not be reliant on other people to survive in this world, even if that means traveling to other places. Because I also believe that over the past 20 years, I don't believe there's really any country at the moment where leaders seem to be doing their job correctly. Over the past few years, let's take COVID for example, not just the government, but society in general was willing to throw the individual out if it hurt the economy. How many people were like, we need to go back to work, I don't care if people die. And do you really want to be putting yourself in a position where you could be hurt by such a scenario? It doesn't need to be that specific scenario, but basically that means that when worse comes to worse, some individuals will go out the window and nationalism doesn't mean anything. Another example to show that I don't believe that there is enough respect for my own values in America is that 20 years ago we sent jobs to China, and a lot of the politicians and leaders of businesses just kind of hoped that people would learn the new skills to cope in the new American economy. But that was mostly hope, and now we have the exact opposite, where the government is complaining about jobs being elsewhere, and we are beginning to tariff companies to bring them back to America. So obviously we failed in some way over the past 20 years. Even if you disagree with Donald Trump, there are people in the country who have not done well over the past 20 years. So this shows that nationalism is not a zero-sum game. There are going to be people who are hurt, even despite the flag waving, which is another reason why you need to take life into your own hands. And given this background, as Trump does tariffs, and as China puts in embargoes on the export of minerals that we use on a daily basis to use our phones and our computers, do I trust the government is not going to make a huge mistake once again? And do you want to put your eggs in one basket for that situation? And this goes further into AI. If United States still has a problem with the idea of welfare and has an extreme individualism where they believe that everybody can just pull themselves up if they work hard, despite the evidence that that's not how it always goes. Do we know what's going to happen with AI if AI does make people redundant for a certain period of time? I myself was hurt in the past couple of years because of AI. I'm not against the idea of AI. I do believe in the long run, hopefully it will help change the way that humans relate to one another once again, which could lead to more freedom for individuals to make money on their own basis without having to rely on other people. But if you look at history, yes, inventions help humans, but there is often also a period of upheaval. And I don't feel secure, given the mistakes our leaders have made over the past 20 years, that they know what they're doing and that they will know how to help people if worse comes to worse. I mean, some other examples. At the moment, you don't need to be a Republican or Democrat to complain. We have an old man who can't say barely a sentence, and we got another guy who says one thing one day and one thing the next day. Even if you're a Trump supporter, you're probably saying right now, oh, it doesn't mean what he said. But do you really want to be underneath people who don't mean what they mean? But you also need to realize that being beholden to nationalism over your own individual self is not safe. I don't know if people realize that part of the reason that we sent so many jobs and we basically endangered the American economy over the past 20 years was because of the belief that by bringing China into the world system, it would not only give them money and bring them into capitalism, it would also change their political system. The people in power are gambling with our lives, and your responsibility to yourself and your friends, which is why I'm telling you this, is that you need to prepare for the situations where these people mess up. If they're just sending jobs, putting people out of work in their home country for the sole sake of regime change, the world is really kooky. And that's another thing, realizing as you get older, is that there's a lot of BS in this world. As I've already mentioned, people making money and surviving and living easier lives by doing not that much. There is a similarity now between 20 years ago when we started sending jobs overseas. Politicians and leaders were just hopeful that people would learn the new skills just magically. And now we have tariffs and trying to get jobs to come back to America. And even though economists in droves are saying that it's going to drive up inflation, people are hopeful that that is not true and just things will magically work out. It's going to cost a lot of money to build mines again in America. I hope I'm wrong on this. It's going to cost money to bring manufacturing back here. And if people are worried about inflation over the past 4 years, which was partially due to Biden's acts to bring down inflation, he brought things back to America by building semiconductor factories here, which I am for, but money, again, is outside of morals sometimes. Who is to say that inflation is going to continue? And there are a lot of people right now saying the next 10 years is going to be stagflation. And again, that is why you need to believe in yourself over the group. But I need to say that what I've said in either video is not a objective critique on America, even though I do believe there are certain things here that need to change. For example, more parties and a better healthcare system. I think anybody in the modern world could be saying the same things wherever they are. In England, in Nigeria, in China, in Japan. What I'm saying is the contract that made nationalism important 100, 200 years ago is no longer as important as it once was, and because of economic forces and technological forces that have made the world the way it is today, individuals have more power to themselves than they ever have, but we need to wake up to that. And so that leads me to my final point, which is individualism, in that the realization of this, that it is on you as an adult to survive in this world, and that believing in the nation or believing in the group to save you will not actually always lead to something. You need to pursue freedom and meaning in its own way. And if money is the main way to do that, you need to live somewhere where you can make the most money and live the most free with the most meaning. Because today, you don't need to live in a certain place to work, especially online. You can teach English in a country, working for a company in another country, making money that goes further in the country that you are living in. And I believe that my skills are more valued in other places, so why not go there? In the end, self-respect is about understanding your surroundings and how it affects you and how you work within it. And that is a value you need to work towards. And so I'm at point A and I'm working towards that point B. And by leaving the United States, I believe that objective can be better achieved. And yes, I could just ignore everybody, but I do believe life today is too difficult for that. But I do believe in individualism still. Goodbye.